This meat is gonna hit the spot! I hope you're hungry for fun, cause that's what's on the menu first!
When I first saw trailers for Fire Emblem Engage, I'll admit that the toothpaste colored hair of the protagonist threw me off a lot. However, as more information popped up, the idea of being able to call upon the powers of past Fire Emblem heroes grew on me. I first dabbled in Fire Emblem with Sacred Stones, but like many others, I started to get really into it when Awakening released. I enjoyed the mix of tactical gameplay along with the social aspects of a band of heroes coming together. Engage serves as a sort of celebration of all Fire Emblem games, and its direction to focus on gameplay first shines through, even with some missteps along the way. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly touch upon the performance of the game, as it runs extremely well on the Switch, both in docked and handheld. I never had any issues in game and haven't noticed any major frame rate dips or performance issues. So, in my 70 hours of playing Engage, did it live up to the hype with so many protagonists? Here's my review of Fire Emblem Engage.
Our final battle lies ahead. Now, it's time to engage.
Okay, let's get right into the meat and potatoes, the gameplay. I'd like to argue that Engage has the strongest gameplay the series has had to date. During my first playthrough, I played on normal and mostly avoided usage of any DLC emblems to allow a more natural gameplay progression. To start things off, I absolutely love the extra details they added when your battles play out. Gone are the days where it feels like it's a my move and then your move type of gameplay, but now you see units parry, dodge, and counterattack much more dynamically than ever before. It's a detail I greatly appreciate, and it really added a lot to my immersion.
This ends now!
For those unfamiliar with Fire Emblem, it's a turn-based strategy game where you command an army around a battlefield composed of tiles. Fire Emblem notably has a weapon triangle mechanic, a rock paper scissors style feature where swords beat axes, axes beat lances, and lances beat swords. There are weapons outside of this triangle like magic tomes, healing staves, and poison daggers that all bring their own pros and cons to the table. Along with that, you also have to consider what units to bring. Cavalry units like the Griffin Knight are able to traverse the battlefield easily and provide support, while armored units like the General are slow but incredibly tanky and powerful. Plus, you gotta add in your favorite husbando or waifu. For me, that was Yunaka. All in all, you're always wanting to bring a little bit of everything to the table.
Must have great eyesight, Yunaka.
Yeah, I have the killer's eyes.
What was that?
Killer eyes! I've got killer eyes! You know, they're great at seeing stuff.
New to Engage is the break mechanic, where attacking an enemy with a favorable weapon disarms them, leaving them unable to counterattack for the current and next battle. Another new mechanic, Smash, comes along with the new heavy weapons. These weapons boast powerful might, and while they always attack second, they will push the enemy one tile away from you, which can be useful to push off enemies from tiles that give them stat bonuses. While the break mechanic was frequently used throughout my playthrough in both my offensive and defensive moves, the smash mechanic never really factored in my tactics, though I did use the heavy weapons. The turn rewind mechanic returns from Shadows and Three Houses, and it's a welcome return. It offers a sort of dynamic difficulty adjustment where it's optional to use, but you can use it to rethink a bad turn instead of starting the whole map over. Or you can be like me and use it when you accidentally use the wrong weapon on a unit or end a turn without taking an action.
The time has come!
Now, as one! Emblem Engage!
On to the newest and most notable feature in Fire Emblem to date, the Engage mechanic. Immediately at the start of the game, you're given access to Engage, and it makes you feel awesome and powerful from the get-go. As you fight and defeat units, or land on blue glowing tiles, you feel the Engage meter. Once full, you can transform with a hero from a previous Fire Emblem game, and are given access to new, game-changing abilities and weapons. These emblems allow a lot of flexibility in the units you choose, such as granting slower units extra movement capabilities, or bulking up the defenses of a star unit so they can effectively solo a whole area by themselves. They come with their own fabled weapons which provide extra effects, as well as open a new path of options for your character, such as a magic user having access to a bow. Last but not least, emblems have moves and passives that can really change the way you use your character. Corrin can change the battlefield and create obstacles to block paths, or create pools and fog to either hinder the enemy or hide your team. Lyn creates clones that can act as decoys but can also counter and aid your character in attacking. The emblems are very successful in creating this fantasy that the heroes within are legendary warriors that empower the units that hold them. You're encouraged to move the rings around and try out new combinations to find out what works for you. As you increase your bonds, your character accrues SP, which is used to gain skills from the emblems to use without having to equip them. Some skills are stat buffs, while others are powerful skills, like giving you increased speed each time you kill an enemy, or letting you attack twice before the enemy attacks once. I will say that I think they didn't do the best job in terms of teaching you how to utilize emblems. I had gone a good third to half of my playthrough not knowing that these stats you unlock from emblems had to be learned and equipped, even on the character with the emblem. I thought leveling the emblems and getting this notification meant that it had automatically given this stat increase, but that was not the case.
This is so frustrating! Rosado! Goldberry! All soldiers, retreat!
A long-time issue in Fire Emblem games are new units showing up in your playthrough just straight up eclipsing your older ones, and Engage is no exception. This is supposed to be offset by the older units having more playtime and thus more chances at getting more stats upon leveling up, but with the RNG nature of your stats, a string of bad luck can severely handicap a character. This is made worse by the fact that this game just throws units at you. Along with what feels like a restrictive unit cap per map until near the end, it feels inevitable that some units you like will have to be benched. And you can tell yourself, hey, that's okay, that's why there's skirmishes in between story maps. Unfortunately, it scales to be a little higher than your current party, which means it gets harder and harder for backup units to keep up. Then you tell yourself, okay, bummer, but I can at least use the arena in the Somniel. If your weaker characters fight your stronger characters and lose, they get reduced experience. Okay, that's unfortunate, but there's that trials thing in the Somniel too, right? Also scaled to your main party, and the experience and rewards don't feel worth the time investment. The only meaningful way I found is to enter training skirmishes, fail them, and then select the retry while gaining XP option. It just feels terrible. It's honestly a bummer, and while I can kind of understand this can promote future playthroughs with new units, it feels like they could have approached this in a better way. It really felt like they discouraged any sort of grinding at the start of the game. Leveling support bonds was extremely difficult at first, as it was only possible through units being adjacent with each other when they act on the battlefield. Also, getting enough skill points to buy major skills was extremely expensive to do. However, at the time of this review, they added features such as letting characters spend time with each other in the Somniel to grind out their support bonds, in addition to a well where you can drop spare items you don't need to re-roll them for other materials, which can include items that increase a character's SP. It's a nice addition which helps alleviate aspects of the grind, though I wish they had added this feature in since the start. Adding on from this, I do wish they had a new game plus feature on release, at least to make the grinds in future playthroughs more streamlined. I do have some copium that they're going to add this in later with DLC like they do with 3 Houses, but for now, there's no new game plus. After a hard-fought battle, the Somniel acts as a safe haven away from the action. Here, you have access to a variety of activities such as training with each other to gain experience, working out for temporary stat buffs, and cooking and eating food to increase support bonds. There's even a ring polishing minigame that tilts me because every time you polish, the emblems complain it doesn't need polishing even when I'm visibly cleaning the gunk off.
But that spot's clean. Aren't you overdoing it? But that spot's clean. I'll ask for help again if the ring needs cleaning.
Many of these activities grant you bond fragments, which are used to level up emblems, engrave your weapons, and create bond rings. These rings are created through a gacha system for each emblem, and are rings your characters can equip to give minor stat boosts and gain skill points, with some S-rank rings having an extra skill attached to them. While initially cool, I realized that they were basically a bait. They do help on early on in the beginning when you don't have enough emblems for your entire party, but in order to gain any of the useful S-rank bond earrings, you either need to get extremely lucky from the gacha system or combine lower tier ones into higher tier ones, which can be very costly.
I didn't realize how spacious this place was.
It is rather quiet, I know, but it will liven up as we gain allies. We may need someone to supply us with equipment as well. Something to consider.
In addition to resting, the Somniel is also where you'll do your preparations for the next battle. There are merchants to buy items for your units, as well as refining and engraving your weapons. You can even craft some outfits for your guests to wear at the Somniel, but unfortunately these cost weapon upgrade materials which are scarce, so I never really bought anything. Weapons this time around are different from the previous Fire Emblem games. Before, weapons would have durability, and after a certain amount of uses, they would break. For me, due to my hoarding nature, it led me to not use a lot of weapons for fear of what if I need it for the next map. This mindset would lead me to beat the game without using it at all. However, in Engage the weapons don't break, which really led me to start trying out other weapons. Weapons can be refined to higher tiers and even upgraded to a new tier of weapon. Adding to this, you can engrave these weapons with emblems, which can help push the strengths of a weapon or reduce its flaws. For example, my Alier had used the silver sword with the Kitae engraving, which reduces the damage you deal, but gives a huge buff on dodging enemy attacks. This allowed Alier to act as a dodge tank as she dodged everything and attack back without worry, and because I refined the sword, I was still able to deal respectable damage. In order to get these leveled up weapons and skills, we need resources. And man, resources are scarce and the costs are high. Near the end of my game, I felt like I needed to grind like a madman in order to have all my units with endgame builds. It felt as if I didn't efficiently use my resources in order to funnel the right skills and weapon augments. Word of advice, for those who end up playing, only fill your farm with dogs ASAP. They provide you with resources to refine weapons, and nothing else the other animals provide comes close to how much of these you will need. While the wealth of activities in the Somniel are initially charming, they wear out their welcome quite rapidly for how often you have to return back to the Somniel. You're never forced to do all these activities, but on the other hand it feels mandatory because again, resources are scarce and you'll want as much as you can get. An extra thing that bothers me is that you learn that the Somniel is a sacred place where only the Divine Dragon and their allowed guests may enter, but you quickly realize that its doors are more open than a frat party on the first weekend of college. It's nothing that affects gameplay, but it's just a little immersion breaking given the lore of the location.
I, Princess Ivy, speak for the Illusian throne. I will now take your lives, your souls, and the rings.
Engage's story can be boiled down to a single word: basic. You play as the divine dragon, Alier. Slumbering for over 1,000 years, you awake with amnesia and learn that the revival of the fellow dragon Sombron is coming. Your journey begins as you set out to collect all the emblem rings and save the world of Elyos. Along the way, you meet and bond with an eclectic cast from the neighboring kingdoms. It's your run-of-the-mill classic story of good versus evil, and while it's nothing to rave about, it did serve its purpose. While the initial setup starts promising, everything about Elyos is given one or two tidbits of lore and never really evolves beyond that. Brodia favors might above all. Solm values freedom. What else do you learn about these countries in the end? Well, not much else. Unfortunately, this same ideology is also present in many characters, oftentimes revolving around one singular character trait. However, I will say it's just nice to be able to play one playthrough and experience the whole story and not multiple, like Fates in Three Houses.
The Divine Dragon is finally awake! Hey, hold on!
There's this big storyline of how important the emblems are to Alier and the world of Elyos itself, but the bond stories you unlock with these emblems never really feel anything more than superficial. These are heroes who triumphed in their world offering their power, but you virtually get zero backstory on any of them. This feels like a huge disservice to both returning and new fans of the series, as returning fans don't get any meaningful interactions with their favorite emblems, and new players don't learn anything besides these characters were in an older Fire Emblem game. And I feel like that's a major oversight that could have really added to the story as well as interest new players to other Fire Emblem games. Furthermore, this story feels wholly centered on Alier and the lords of each country, but this has always been the case for the Fire Emblem games I've played where the supporting cast gets left behind. Coupled with the fact that the game gives you so many units to work with and having to write so many different bond stories, it really felt like it made the quality take a hit. I get that for classic players they might not even have that unit alive by that point, but it still feels bad that the game just completely voids their existence in the main story. I would have preferred a smaller roster if it meant a deeper story that involved everyone. Not everyone was written equally, but there are a few supporting characters like Yunaka that have interesting stories and bonds to share.
My name is Zephyr. I am a mage dragon of great power, and Lord Sombron's humble servant in all things. As for my companions here, they are like family to me. Together we are known as the Four Hounds.
You tell yourself that. She's a dragon and the rest of us are humans. Family, she calls us.
Engage put its worst foot forward in terms of its beginning storytelling, and while it picks up in the latter half, it's still not great. The way the game structures its story points in the first half feel a bit unbelievable. The storyline basically goes like this. Aelir enters a new country. Someone stops you and says, "Hey, who the hell are you?" "I'm the Divine Dragon." "Okay, I believe you. Here's money and access to our sacred rings and resources." Literally every single character just accepts the words from Aelir's mouth as truth, with no sense of wanting to verify. The characters, emblems, and general storyline all have potential to be something much better, but sadly it never truly does. Now, while the story might miss the mark, I have to say I personally enjoyed the art design of Engage. The animated cutscenes were a joy to watch when they popped up, and the characters that come along your journey are varied and generally very well designed. I even got used to our toothpaste themed protagonist. Are they supposed to be realistic looking soldiers? No way. But it's an affordance I allow because the characters were beautifully created and really helps add some flavor to the generally bland story. Another key element that greatly enhanced the mediocre story was the incredible music. The scores are excellent and wonderfully fit the emotions they are trying to invoke. It really puts into perspective how important sound and music design is for a game. From deep, impactful tones used to portray Brodia, to the soothing vibes mimicking the graceful nature of Farinay, each song felt masterfully crafted for its role to fulfill. Upon clearing the game and taking the time to sit down and listen to the soundtrack, it brings up memories of the story I had experienced and the battles I had fought, and bathed them in a more pleasant light.
We won't lose! Not today!
Engage manages to create an experience worthy of bearing the Fire Emblem name. Would I consider it a genre-defining experience? No. But is it overall a fun experience? Yeah. A lot of very solid features all come together and create a game that was enjoyable to experience. There were moments in time, namely the Somniel, where it felt like a slog and some mechanics felt half-baked. But when it came down to it, Engage gave me that feeling of, well, being engaged. Theory crafting units to make them strong and seeing them wipe the battlefield never stop being fun. And while it can be hard to stomach the cheesy moments and general kumbaya nature of everyone, you just can't help rooting for Aelir and company in their journey to save the world. I'm more than willing to play through it again, especially now that I understand the mechanics of the game, and even more so when all the DLC comes out so I can sit down and plan my builds out. I do hope that Intelligent Systems' next Fire Emblem game can bridge a better gap between previous social aspects, like you see in Three Houses, along with the improved gameplay mechanics of Engage. If they can keep learning and building upon the things they're trying out, I have faith that they can create something masterful. But until then, I highly recommend both new players and returning fans to experience Fire Emblem Engage. And Yunaka.
You can see